where we prove that quiet doesn't mean invisible and deep thoughts deserve a mic. If you've ever felt drained by small talk or mastered the art of sneaking out of the room or wish the world understood the magic of solitude, this is your space. We dive into everything from navigating social energy to embracing creativity, confidence, and the unique power of being an introvert. So get comfy, plug in, and let's turn up the volume on our quiet confidence. I'm Amber Hansel, and this is Introverts Unmuted. Today, I am speaking with Stacy, who is a conversion copywriter and messaging strategist for service-based business owners. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you could be here because what you do is it's important for introverts because using a messaging framework and really getting clear on what we're writing and what we're doing in this space. So tell me more about what you do.
Yeah. So a lot of what I do is help companies or like small business owners when they are either like going through a transition in their rebranding or they're newer to business, depending on where they are, but really figure out like, what do you actually say when you show up and how do you position your offers in a way that makes sense and not necessarily to be like making the most amount of money, but to find the people who are actually the best fits and people who are going to be really aligned with how you work. And so that's a lot of what I do. And then that's like the strategy behind what I do. And then I actually like write the copy that goes along with that strategy.
Yeah, because the copy within that strategy, you have to have the strategy first before we can go to the copy. And I feel like a lot of times we do it reverse.
Yeah, and it's super interesting too, because, with brand messaging and like being able to say like, what's your elevator pitch? Like that's brand messaging. That's being able to like encompass what you do in a short sentence. But that's like super important for your website, but it's also super important if you're just like having a conversation with somebody to be able to like pull that out of your back pocket and like say confidently like, hey, here's what I do and here's who I help. And not to say like you need to have something memorized, but like when you have that prepared ahead of time, it flows so much easier when you're actually having conversations with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a recent podcast episode about just like introductions, how to introduce yourself in different situations that you're in, because you're not going to introduce yourself the same at like a giant corporate networking event than like a coffee chat. There is a difference. The core message is still the same, but it's just like worded differently.
Yep. And that's where you think about like tone and like the different places that you're showing up, like your voice and your message is going to stay the same, but like your tone is going to be different. So like your website will probably be like a little bit more professional versus like social media. You have a little bit more like creativity and freedom to be playful. So it really depends like who you're talking to and who you want to be talking to. So there's a lot to think about.
There is. And so then we start, over analyzing then everything that we start talking about. And we go then with way too much and the quantity becomes overwhelming then.
Yeah, that's been like a huge theme for me this year of like unlearning all of the things that I thought I had to do, but don't actually have to do. Just like the way that I was told, like I should be running my business this way, like being on social media. That was like when I said I was getting off of social media, I had coaches tell me like that was a horrible idea. Like I shouldn't do that. Like I'm going to lose so much. And it was really scary to get off because it was like so contrary to all the advice that you hear. And I will say like I did feel a dip because I was changing my marketing strategy completely, but I am like now 6 months into it and I've leaned more into my podcast. I've leaned more into my email and I've been leaning more into like networking in person and building those like actual relationships with people. And I feel like the pendulum has swung back and it's working really well. And I feel much better about how I'm doing business. So I think permission to do whatever you want in business, as long as you're still putting in the work, like don't let somebody else tell you what you have to do.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to stop listening to the shoulds. And I've taken this really into account as well in the last year. And I think so many of us are like, I am done. I feel so exhausted. The social media battery is completely drained. I don't want to show up in the same capacity that I used to. And because I think these platforms have changed so much that it feels so performative that I don't want to do that. That's not many introverts and neurodivergents. That's not us. That's not why we wanted to be on social media. We wanted to be on social media to connect and share our message.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I have a lot of feelings about like the social media companies and like the way that they show different content and how the algorithm works. But I guess like if you're a business owner, just like thinking about like, is this actually impacting my business? Like, am I just spending a lot of time on this? And like, am I actually getting results from this? Or is there a better use of my time? Because I would spend my whole Monday just like batching content, and it was really tiring. And like, I am very introverted. I am like good at talking to people, but like I need breaks after. And so just like taking that out of the equation just felt so much better for me. But I do want to like mention this idea of like balancing it out, because there was a few weeks ago I had like several events in like a 5-day period where it was like people, and I literally could not interact with people for like 4 days afterwards. I was like, nobody talk to me. I need to hide.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is we have a limit on how much that we can socialize. And it always feels like with social media that it's like you're on. Even networking events and in-person events, you are on during that event. And it's really important to set the boundary of like, well, no, I'm done after.
Yeah, and it's hard because you get that dopamine hit from social media. And like I on Instagram took everything down and put up a 9 grid like, I don't know, a month or two ago. And when I put the 9 grid up, it was getting like a bunch of likes and people commenting. And I'm like, oh my God, it feels so good. Like, do I want to do this again? And I was like, no, there's a reason that I walked away from this. But like you get that dopamine hit and it makes it really hard. And the other thing is like that's where I built my community, right? Like that's where I built my business. And so it was really hard to be like, hey, I'm actually moving away from here because everybody I know is here. And, it just takes more intentional effort of like staying in contact with the people you actually want to stay in contact with, which I think actually makes your relationships like a lot stronger and like a better network. But it is like, it's different.
It is. Did you then transition them to your email list, to your podcast, like keeping those relationships, or did you just set up like a private group? How is that transition? Because I know a lot of us are like, let's go away.
So yeah, I've had my email list since the beginning of my business. That is like my most consistent marketing platform. So a lot of the people that I was interacting with were already on my email list. And then I started my podcast. And so I think like for me, long form just like feels better because I can focus on it. Kind of like you were saying with the networking events, like it's like you're focusing on it for a short period of time and then you set it and forget it. So between those two things, like my email list and my podcast, like I feel like I still get those conversations. I'm still being able to position myself as like, hey, I'm a copywriter and I know messaging strategy and here's how I can help you. Did I lose some people? Yes. Like, and I think that's okay. Because one of my other goals has really been to like shift more into like my local community and people who, yes, we do business online, but like, hey, I can actually like stop by your office and like get to know you and really see like, what does it feel like in here before I write a website? So I think like, it's not so much about like, shutting yourself out from the world. It's just like about finding like, what's the most meaningful way for you to connect with your people in a way that's going to like, not feel super draining.
Yeah, I Really agree. And I think there's so many more of us that are wanting to step out into the real world and meet our clients and talk with them in person. I know quite a few people are doing that. And it's exciting because then as introverts, yes, we can go out for the couple hours and then we get to come home and change into our comfy clothes and hide out and do the work.
Yes. And it's really funny to think about because I mean the internet hasn't like it's been around for a long time, but like it hasn't been around that long. Like a lot of some businesses that I work with have been around much longer than the internet, right? And so just like sometimes like leaning into these like older strategies and adapting them to digital marketing, but like really focusing on like just doing really good work, getting referrals, like those things go so far. And like as introverts, I feel like that's like our superpower because we have like hidden strengths that nobody knows about because we're like so awkward about talking about ourselves. Uh, so like the doing the good work, the getting the referrals, like and then like learning more about your people and using and leaning into that when you are doing your digital marketing, like that's going to go so much further than like okay, like let me just like post every single day and make sure that I'm like forcing myself to engage on comments every day of like these random people that I don't actually have connections with.
Yeah, and I think really understanding your audience and understanding those people is going to go into your copy so that it's going to attract the next client and it's going to create. So if you do post on social media, you don't need to post as much. Absolutely not, because it's going to resonate with the right people then.
Exactly. And that's the goal.
Mhm. Yeah. And as well, do you have a blog as well? Or
I do not. It's on my list of things to do. I definitely want to lean more into like SEO and get
Mhm.
more people through my website since I'm not on social media anymore. I have been um, also trying to write a book about my time in the education system. So I have been really asking myself like what's coming off of my plate so that I can add something onto my plate. So I'm not like super burnt out. So the blog is in theory happening, but it's also like at the bottom of the priority list right now because I just have to be honest about like what my capacity actually is and how I can actually do it.
Yeah. And I love that you're like, it's on the list of things to do, but it's not a priority because I really want other things right now. And I think it's important to realize that we don't have to be everywhere. Even if you're not on social media, you don't have to have a blog. You know, people are always like, oh, well, if you're not on social media, do you have this, this, this? Well, no, I just have this and this, and I show up in these in this capacity.
Yeah, and like for me, like I do a lot of collaborations, like I do because I come from like a teaching background, I do a lot of like guest teaching and summits and like that's effective marketing for me because I'm like in my element when I'm teaching. So I think like just like reflecting on what are your strengths and what makes sense for you. And I think it's hard because when you're online, a lot of the advice is like geared towards like really big companies, like the idea of like world building and showing up in all of the places and building an experience. Like, yes, but like if you're one person and you show up in one place and you build authentic relationships, that's going to go much further than like showing up on LinkedIn and Instagram and your blog and YouTube and Pinterest. Like, there's only so much you can do. And so, really figuring out like what's actually going to be the best use of my time. And that's hard at the beginning because you don't know.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning when you're first starting out, you really do have to experiment with numerous things. And so that you can find your rhythm and find, hey, my energy is really going this way. And realizing that it's okay many years down the road that you go, this isn't, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to switch it this way. No one's going to tell you no because there are no shoulds in this space. It is your own business. So if you decide, hey, I'm not going to be on Instagram anymore, find me over here, they're either going to follow you or they won't. And the ones that don't, weren't probably going to buy from you or want that relationship.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like when you think about like, this timeline and the economy and the trust gap where like people are a lot more hesitant to buy online, especially for services because they've been burned, like because there's so much going on in this space. And so like it's really hard when people are using ethical marketing strategies and they're like, but it's not happening fast enough. And it's like, that's because you're being ethical about it and you're like giving people time to think and like actually making sure that like this is the right fit and it's the right time for them and really coming from a place of service. And that's always going to be slower than like flashy, schemy things that are like pushing for sales. And that's really hard to navigate because you're like, well, should I just do that thing because I want to make more money? And like, maybe I should be like asking people for credit cards on a, sales call. And like really figuring out like what's the line for you and like what actually feels good, because there's so much advice out there that is so bad.
There really is, and it's so hard. You have to really trust your discernment and trust your own values and beliefs. And I will say you have to continue to lean into yourself more and more as there's more and more advice coming out. And it's so hard to not, think when you're scrolling, going, oh, well, maybe I should just like throw up a Black Friday sale. She made like $10,000 last year. Well, I could do that too. No, you might, but you might not, because your situation is not her situation. And I think that's where the comparison in this space is so intense right now. And it just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, and it's really hard too. Like I definitely fell for things that were like scale to 5K, and then it was like the end of the program, and I'm like, wait, I have zero money, because it sounds really nice, and you're like, I'm sure like the people in your audience, like they're hard workers, like they work hard. It's not like they're sitting around doing nothing, but it's also in business, like there's so many ups and downs, and there's going to be times when you are working your butt off and you're not going to see the results. And then there's going to be days where you're making a ton of money and it's awesome. But like, you have to remember to save that money so that like the next time it dips, you still can pay yourself. So it's interesting. Like I am 3 years in and I feel like at this point, I'm like getting to the point where I have steady clients and I can pay myself very consistently. But there was a lot of months where I was like, I'm broke. I'm like, do I still want to do this? And it's, it's just like the nature of starting a business from scratch. Like I came from a completely different industry. I didn't have any marketing network. All my people were education people. So it was very hard to transition.
Yeah. And you are definitely not alone. I've been in this space for 7 years now, put it that way. But I've pivoted again and again and again. And I have watched it completely change and evolve. And we really, I feel, have lost what social media is for. It's not for your business. They have turned it into that because they get to make more money. But in reality, it is about connecting with others and finding people that you get to say, hey, want to meet online to have a coffee chat because we have so much alike. And so messaging around just bringing it back to you and what your values and mission is the most important thing.
Yeah. And like, I can give like a quick overview of my framework that I teach my clients inside my membership, but it's basically like, what's the story that you're telling around your ideal client? So like, what are they struggling with? Why do you approach your work in the way that you do? Like, not just like, hey, this is the problem that I solve, but like, what experiences do you have that informs the way you approach your work? Like, that's huge. Like being able to say like, hey, I do this differently because I learned XYZ before, and that's why I do this with my clients. And this is the results that they're able to get because of that. Like that shows your expertise and your authority and your confidence. And that's going to go so much further, like putting that on your website than being like, hey, here's my, no shade to people who do this, but like, here's my skincare routine, right? Like, that's not why people are hiring you for a service. Like, sure, they might like you because of that, and they might connect with you on a personal level, but like being able to talk about how you solve people's problems and why you approach that work and what are your experiences, like that is going to go so much further. And that is something that I really work with my clients around, is like this like long-term sustainability, because like once you understand like here's your message, you can really start to like layer like more and more depth into it, because you start learning more and you start doing things even differently, and then you get more experience from clients and you can layer in what you learn from there, and just showing that like, hey, I know what I'm talking about and I have reasons for doing what I do. Like that goes really far. And I always start with values too. So I'm also really glad that you said that.
Yeah, I think it's such an important piece, because people, when you voice your opinions and your values and your beliefs, you will attract the people that have similar ones. And then you're going to limit the red flag clients that you come across, because you've said, hey, this is what I do, and this is why I do it. And I love how you said your framework of like really being able to show your expertise. And people want to know, well, how do you know this? And I am so awful at that, because I always forget of like, oh yeah, I have been around for a long time. I've seen a lot of things and done a lot of different things. I started back as a virtual assistant, like designing websites that I had no business designing, but I did. To now, like coaching introverts and having a podcast and helping really them solidify their voice in conversations, because I have seen all these conversations and seen so many people with that. And so when we can say, hey, this is what I did, this is where I came from, that's what is really going to solidify that message even more.
Yeah. And I think like one of the mistakes that I see is like people take this like idea of showing their expertise by like teaching how to do something, and you don't actually have to teach your people how to do your job. Like you can just teach them about your approach, or like the gap and why that gap matters. Like why is what they're doing not working? Like from your professional opinion, why is what you do the best solution for them? And not necessarily like, hey, here's how to design a website, or here's how to write copy, but like instead being like, here's why you need great copy. Here's why messaging matters in your business more than whatever. And that's like really where you move from educating people to really positioning your offer.
Yeah, because we can educate and people can DIY it themselves, and many people will, but it's about recognizing why they need you and your unique value.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think like being at it now for a few years, really learning more about like who is my ideal client. I actually just wrote an email about this, but it like this idea of like when I started, I really want to work with solopreneurs because it felt really scary to like try to work with small businesses that have been around for 50 years. Because I just didn't have the confidence yet, right? But like as I got to know more about like those companies and what are they really struggling with, like I've learned that I really love working with like generational small businesses where like their grandmother started the company and now they are now their granddaughters are taking over, and like that feels really special to me that I get to work on something like that. So I think like if you are figuring out your messaging or even like who you're speaking to, like just, giving it time, having conversations with people and like just like listening to people, like that's huge.
Yeah, and introverts are very good listeners. We don't like to talk because we don't want to talk about ourselves. So asking the questions, open-ended questions, to allow the people to talk and you listen and go, yes, that is exactly it. And then catching those key phrases that they're using so that you can insert it into their copy and to make that really great website for them because you have listened.
Oh yeah, that's like part of my process when I'm writing copy is like I actually get on calls with like my clients and I listen to them talk about their experience working with my clients, and that I always get like such good things. Like I always get great things from my clients, but something about like somebody else that's like outside the bubble giving feedback, it just gives like a completely different perspective and you get like these really great nuggets.
Yeah, I can imagine because there is such a different when we shift that perspective, then it's so neat to see how someone else sees them. And I love, yeah, I'm all for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard when you're like I have a hard time in my own business because I'm like, you're so close to everything and you know everything so well. You just assume other people know and see what you see, but they don't. So like I love always if you're feeling stuck, get an outside perspective. People will be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Just asking people, what do you think of this? Or even surveys are a great way to just get that outside perspective. Because, like you said, we are so close to our own business and it's hard to see outside of that bubble.
Even like going on Reddit and looking up like things in your industry, like if you like to like stock forums, like Reddit is a great place to get some good market research because you're really seeing like people are anonymously talking. They're a lot more open to talking about their issues anonymously. So you can get some good insights there.
Yeah, I like that idea because it is you don't have to talk to people about it. You just get to do your research online and hunt down kind of what you're looking for.
And Reddit is full of introverts, so
It's true. It's true. I occasionally stalk over there as well. So, Stacey, how can we connect with you and get, into your world?
yes, you can check me out at staceybragacopy.com. You can sign up for my email list there. And then you can also find my podcast, Cozypreneur, on there too. And it's all marketing strategies that don't involve getting dressed in the morning. So perfect for this group.
Yes. I will definitely be checking that out and making sure to connect with you again. This has been such a great conversation. I will have Stacey's links in the show notes, so make sure that you go sign up for her email list and check out her podcast as well. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.